So when I'm dealing with like some of these people, I'm just like, how am I having to explain to you like how an adult should act in this situation? Like, like why are you calling me to say like, oh, so and so like said this to me and it like made me mad? Like, okay,
Okay.
you're 50 years old. Like,
Like if you have any chance at taking advantage of Social Security, don't fucking call me. Like
it's crazy. Like, hello, everyone, and welcome to Seriously Loco, the Seriously Crazy fan podcast for El Paso Locomotive FC, a proud member of the Beautiful Game Network and brought to you by Roughneck Scarves and Icarus FC. I'm your host, Phil Bakke, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mika Burrell. Mika, how you doing? How you recovering from Locomotive Match Day, which has become a bit of a toil these days?
I'm just tired of having to answer for it at work. Um, like it never fails that it gets mentioned. Like I saw they lost again. It's like, yup, sure did.
Yeah.
But no, man, it's okay. A little bit of case of the Mondays for one thing or another. Locomotive definitely included in that, but still happy to be here talking with you tonight about it. Hopefully, it'll be cathartic.
Yeah, and speaking of catharsis, you took the chance on a Monday to write out some of your thoughts and feelings on the start to the season on our Patreon. So yeah, tell us a little bit about the piece that you published today for our patrons.
Yeah, I went ahead and just wrote 1,000 words, kind of like a lot of our pieces lately have been pretty analytical, heavy on the stats, but I just decided to write something from the heart and from memory. Um, so yeah, it's just kind of like my overall impressions of the past four match days, and acknowledging that we're in really, really poor form to start the season, to start the John Hutchinson era. But I kind of just highlighted some of the issues, some of the good things, but a lot of the issues, and what I think um, we are missing, and just just kind of an overview. And um, I think, go ahead and read it. And of course, if you're listening to this, let me know what you think, because I think it captures a lot of what a lot of people are feeling, to be fair. So yeah, just something from the heart a little bit, something I just kind of riffed on for 1,000 words. So yeah, go check it out and let us know how you thought of it.
Yeah, I think I really enjoyed it as well, and I think a lot of people who are fans of Locomotive it'll resonate with them, just because there has been this weird dichotomy to the start of the season in the fact that like a lot of what I see and a lot of what like tells in the stats, it's like there are good things in there, but at the end of the day, like we have 4 losses to start the season, and no one would have thought that could be described as good by any stretch of the imagination. So it's like this kind of, we're all wrestling with this, like the eye test and like and certain things about this team like say be patient,
Mm-hmm.
but that's really tough. So I think the piece deals with that
Right.
really well. And I think for those who
Thanks,
have been
man.
interacting with us like online during these things, the reality is that like all of these social media mediums are very limited in terms of our ability to communicate in 140 characters or whatever, 280
Sure.
characters, whatever. Like, these are complex thoughts and feelings that we're having, so the idea that we're able to convey like all of this complexity in a kind of a quick way, we don't always nail it on the head, and we don't always get our kind of like whole thought into into a tweet. So just know that like we are experiencing these same things, and I think Mika's piece captures that really well. So you can check it out on our Patreon, patreon.com/seriouslyloco. The other places you can find our stuff, if you are finding us for the first time, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram. On Twitter at seriouslyloco, and on Instagram at seriously_loco. And then you can also find us on your favorite podcast platform, in basically anywhere you get podcasts. And we have new podcasts going up all the time. And then a new thing we've been doing recently, and I think we did to good effect with this away match, we kind of brought it back from season 1, which is 4 away matches. We're doing our watch-alongs of the match live. And those are up on our Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch at the moment. We're still working on spreading out into other platforms, but those have been fun. Like, despite the results, those have actually been a good way to take in those away matches.
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun, and shout out to everyone that's joined us on there and bantered with us, just shot the shit. It's a good way to not have to listen to the away commentary, which, as we know, is hit or miss, and we of course are biased about Duke and Heidi. But yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun, and I guess we'll do another one tomorrow, maybe ?
Yeah. So. I think we'll have one tomorrow night. So US Open Cup away to Central Valley Fuego FC in Fresno, California. It kicks off at 8:30 Mountain Time, so we'll probably go live about 8:15.
That's a nightcap for you, is it not?
Yeah, that's a 10:30 kickoff on the old Eastern time. So yeah, we're gonna be deep in it, but it's
Brutal.
Open Cup. It's a chance for Locomotive to bounce back. So hopefully it'll be a fun one, and we'll get to celebrate some goals and a winning start to the US Open Cup campaign. But we're talking about all these social media networks and everything, everywhere where you can find us. And to start this off, obviously, we're going to talk the loss in San Diego. We're going to look ahead to the Open Cup game. But to get things started off, at Paul B915 on Instagram, he asked, he didn't ask. He said, not a question, but as a longtime Southampton fan, even I'm getting a bit concerned. Obviously, Paul here is referencing the 4-loss start to the USL Championship season. So, Mika, I mean, in general terms, obviously you've put your thoughts down on paper, but the concern is obviously there for all to see. No one wanted a winless start to the season like this. How are you feeling like coming out of this loss to Loyal?
Yeah, it's disheartening for sure. And actually, I'm just now making this connection, reading this comment from Paul and being a Southampton fan, because Southampton have the unfortunate statistic of losing 9-0 like in back-to-back seasons. I think that was in 2 different seasons.
Yeah.
Despite having like pretty good like aggressive play style and aggressive coach, and so there's definitely some parallels there now that I think about it. The Southampton prone to dropping a couple shockers, but overall like a technically and tactically sound team. So it was just interesting that just occurred to me. But yeah, I mean, if you're a bit concerned, if you're really concerned, if you're hitting the proverbial panic button we've been hearing about, like I certainly don't blame anyone.
Yeah.
It is concerning, 4 straight losses. We're propping up the table right now, and it's not good, and the vibes are just not good. And people are getting agitated, I think, and rightfully so, because it's not the way that we wanted to start or that we expect to continue.
Yeah, it's been brutal for a number of reasons. I think you can look at the some of the the stuff like within the fan base as well, like the stress that it's causing in terms of like people just obviously airing out like how they're feeling, which totally valid. A lot of the concerns, but there's not the good vibes, as you said, like that there have been over the last few years, where it is largely positive. There's a lot of good things to talk about. We just haven't had that result to start out the season to really latch onto. We've had so many glimpses, but as you said so well in your piece, like we're looking for that complete performance and that complete 90 minutes, and it just hasn't been there from this Locomotive side yet this season. And even beyond maybe the complete 90 in terms of like, you know, dominating start to finish or really like managing a game well or something like that, it's really a lot of these kind of moments within a match, because I think like we've seen this Locomotive team look good for long stretches of these games. But there are these moments where inevitably it seems in these opening 4 games, it's something has gone wrong, which has led to either, you know, that first goal or the equalizer or whatever. And in this game, it was like these couple of moments where a good San Diego Loyal team made us pay for some of these slack moments, maybe.
Yeah, there's been a lot of individual errors, and I think the focus has been on Evan Newton because, you know, the goalkeeper is kind of hard to miss when they make an error, right? But it's not just been him. I mean, there have been all types of mistakes all over the park. And this is by no means to like dig out the players. It's what we see and we have to speak about it, right? And I think that they know it too. In fact, we know they know it. Let's put it that way. But yeah, it's just been these moments in games that really sabotage the entire effort, because if you look at, you know, and some people might not care to hear this, but if you look at the advanced analytics, we really should be taking more from these games than we are doing. So we really are, in a lot of ways, beating ourselves. And that's no disrespect to San Diego Loyal. I think they're a very, very good team. I think they're like the most prolific team in USL right now. Still early, but they're really good. They look like they're very well coached, you know, by Landon Donovan and his staff. And got a lot of really good players. I mean, Amang was just terrible to live with. Nick Moon, Vassell. I mean, they have a lot of talent there. Guido as well in the midfield. So, yeah, they were a good team, but I think we did deserve a draw. And not only are the mistakes costing us, but we also aren't like getting the rub of the green, which I know is pretty abstract, but it's true. I think there's like just Lady Luck is not on our side, and that's why it makes these mistakes so much more painful, because we know we're not getting the calls, we're not getting, you know, things to just turn in our favor. So we have to do the best with what we can control, and oftentimes we're not able to control these games.
The Seriously Loco match review. Talking through like the incidents of this match and the big moments, obviously, it all started in what was a really flat opening half hour from Locomotive, and maybe first half. You could just say first half, I guess. Yeah. Kyle Vassell scores the opener in the 21st minute. It all comes from Nick Moon's dribble. He was playing right back, but almost like a Hutchinson style move of he came infield, he was further infield and beats Yuma with a little dribble move, and then tries to chip Evan Newton, who had charged out to close down the angle, and Kyle Vassell able to tap in to an empty net essentially. That goal, obviously there's different layers to what's going on. But this felt like one of those moments where it's like Yuma's beat a little bit too easily on the dribble. Newton is doing what he can to try to close down the angle and keep Nick Moon from having kind of a free shot. And then Vassell isn't really tracked like by the remainder of the defense and has that ability to tap in. So, I mean, that goal sort of like demonstrative of all of these goals that we've been talking about, where you can point to one person as being kind of the chief culprit for conceding the goal, but there are like other pieces of the puzzle where it could be better and probably should be better.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those goals that was coming, though, because of that flat start that you mentioned. We couldn't get out of our own half. And, when you're inviting pressure like that, eventually that pressure's going to tell. We're not solid enough. We're not fit enough to play that way for 90 minutes, let alone 45, right? Let alone 30.
Yeah.
But, we'll call it the first half just for the sake of it. But, yeah, I saw a question or a comment maybe, I don't know if it was to us or just on the timeline, but there was a question about, did Evan Newton, once again, did he go out when he shouldn't have? And actually, I think Evan does the right thing in this regard, because there was I don't think he really had a choice, because there's just not enough numbers in that area at that moment when the ball comes in. I think he has to close that angle with the understanding and the assumption that somebody is going to track the runner arriving. And that doesn't happen, or at least it doesn't happen, to a satisfactory level.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's Boehner who tries to intervene there or what, because, Yuma's, like you said, Yuma's beat, and he's the remaining center back. But I think the goal was coming. I think San Diego's definitely earned it with the way that they came out in that first half. Just, very dominant, very composed, moving the ball really quickly. Something I think that we failed to do for a lot of this first half. So, and it's pretty much a tap-in at that point. But yeah, it is indicative of a lot of these goals that we're conceding.
The equalizer comes from Harry Brockbank, and it comes from a piece of play from Locomotive that was very rare in the first half, in that, one, they had the ball in loyal territory, which was not pretty rare occasions in the first half that happened.
Yeah.
But the ball's played out. It's actually a nice little move, and the ball's played out to Emmanuel Sinupe, who he whips the ball in, kind of overhits the cross, to be totally fair, but it lands at the feet of Nick Hines, who does the right thing first time, plays it right back into the 6-yard box. Lucho is threatening. Defender, I think, makes contact with the ball, nearly scores an own goal. Big save by Vegas, but it falls straight to Harry Brockbank, who is crashing in. That moment feels like it was used by Hutchinson at halftime, because that sort of move and that sort of sequence from us became much more of a feature, I guess, in the second half, when Locomotive looked the better side. And it kind of begs the question of, okay, why couldn't we have been doing that? Not to say it's that simple to score goals, because if it was that simple, obviously, games would end 11-10 or something like that. It's not that simple. But in this case, it was, ball goes into the box for basically the only time in the entire half, and we get our reward.
Yeah. I mean, that just goes to show you that sometimes you just have to put the ball into a dangerous area. And it's, maybe the stats will prove me wrong, but just from my memory and from watching the games, we don't really cross the ball much at all.
No.
Which is quite a departure from, what we've been used to these past 3 seasons. So when when Manny tries that, it was really oh, right, we can do that. And hey, everything good that came, which wasn't much, in that first half, I feel like came through Sinupe. And credit to Hines too for getting into those, dirty areas really and picking that up. And Harry Brockbank, I mean, credit to him. That's 2 goals in the past 2 games now, which is, he's a bit of an enigma, because I think actually he had quite a poor game, if I'm being completely honest, as far as defending goes and some of the decision making. But, he does score the goal, and he is arriving in those underlapping areas, kind of where, the half space, if you will, really, that where he's arriving to score these goals. So, fair play to him for doing that. But I think we do want more from Harry on the other end of the ball.
Yeah.
But 2 goals in 2 games is nothing to not highlight.
Yeah, and based on the crossing stats, you make an interesting point. Based on the crossing stats, we end the game with 4 accurate crosses, which was a 25% success rate, which just
pretty good.
Yeah, actually, really, really good. But that means I would say we played then close to 14 or 15 crosses in the second half alone.
Right.
Like, because we ended the first half with 2 shots, 1 on target, which was the goal, and end the game with, I think it just shows the difference in performance level between the first half and the second half, where we had 2 shots in the first half, we had 13 shots in the second half. So in terms of like chance generation and everything, it went through the freaking roof at halftime. But we couldn't get to halftime. Again, we have this. This is sort of an issue that's developed. Is we couldn't get to halftime at 1-1, as Moshe Bane scores a goal in the 40th minute. This one lofted cross into the box, knotted down at the back post by Conway. Or sorry, not knotted, but played back into the center by Conway and Moshe Bane with a good first time finish. This one, watching it back, feels like our whole defense is kind of like caught under the ball somehow as this ball gets lofted to the back post.
Again, though, like we've seen this. I mean, I think back to the go-ahead goal, or just the go-ahead goal or the equalizer, I can't remember, that New Mexico United scored from just a simple long ball that gets knotted on by Daniel Bruce. Not the same play, but the flat-footedness and the slow reactions, we've seen that before.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know why that keeps happening. Because we're very focused in the attacking third.
Yeah.
But it's when we're defending that it's just like people are looking at one another and trying to figure out what it is that they need to be doing, who's got who.
Yeah.
And the reaction is just too slow. So, yeah, it's just brutal. It's because it's the worst kind of way to go into a half. And it keeps happening.
Yeah.
It just keeps happening.
Yeah, it's been a struggle in terms of goals being conceded right before halftime or right at the start of a half. And in this case, it's right before halftime to break the deadlock and send Loyal into the locker room up a goal. And that the flat-footedness that you pointed out, I think if we can be critical of anything in particular, it's that the defense that John is trying to play with this, he's going to play aggressive. He's playing this high line. There's a lot of things. Proactivity is pretty much the thing that you must have. You have to step in and win the ball. You have to compete and win the headers. You have to challenge at every point and try to kind of win the ball as early as possible, because the deeper it gets into that move, the less numbers you're going to have, just because it's it of the style that we're playing. And in this case, Conway isn't challenged. No one is challenging Conway at the far post to make that cross more difficult or to win the ball in the air before it even reaches him. There's just not, at any step in that move, we're not challenging the cross. We're not challenging the second cross, essentially. Mm-hmm. And Moshe Bane is in enough space to get his shot away, not really being closed down. So it's just a sequence of not being proactive and being reactive to what's happening around us that has then led to what is a good goal for Moshe Bane, good finish, all of that. But it shouldn't be as simple as we made it for them, it feels like.
Yeah, 100%.
So
that's a breakdown in just the system. I mean, I spoke about individual errors, and we have a question coming up on that, but systemically too, there's issues there.
So we come out at halftime, and there was a marked change, and I think we do have to acknowledge the fact that Locomotive came out of the half and were by far the better team for the second 45. Somewhere early in the second half, I think it's around the 52nd minute or something like that, ball's played in behind by Locomotive. Emmanuel Sanupe, Manny runs onto the ball. Kyle Adams absolutely wipes him out. Referee rightly blows a whistle. Doesn't spot that the contact was actually inside of the box, and not just like on. It wasn't really on the chalk. It wasn't really like. It was clearly inside of the box. The assistant and the referee somehow combined to miss this decision, and Locomotive denied a penalty kick that they rightfully should have had at 2-1.
Yeah. And this goes back to like we're just not getting the calls, getting the bounces, and not creating our own luck, I guess. But this is the second time that Sanupe's pace and his just sheer athleticism has gotten us a penalty, or it should have at least.
Yeah.
And think back to Sacramento where he absolutely baits Dan Casey into a really bad challenge. Does the same here, and I don't know how this is missed. I mean, it's just shocking. I mean, in real time, I thought it might have been just outside, but I'm not a professional referee. I expect pro referees to get this right. Like, it's just so infuriating. And it's one of the best, like, replays that I've seen.
Yeah.
So I hope that this is making its rounds. I doubt it, but I mean, I hope, in some universe, these referees are looking at this and saying this cannot happen.
Yeah.
This is a penalty, clear as day, and the defender is a really lucky boy, gets away with it. Nowhere near the ball, and assuming that we score the penalty, which you would hope it wouldn't be Richie Ryan taking it again. That could have been 2-2. It could have been a much different game, and we could have actually capitalized on what was really significantly better from Locomotive in the second half. And I think if you ask Landon Donovan, he would agree. He was really upset with the way that the second half played out. And just said that it wasn't good enough from his team. So everyone knows it. Everyone knows we came out and we're better. And in that moment, we just didn't get what we deserved.
The gut punch of that moment is doubled by the fact that Thomas Among scores in the 66th minute. It's a weird sequence where it's a really lax throw in from Harry Brockbank. He basically bounces it off the head of the Loyal attacker. And Loyal get possession, play kind of a hopeful ball in behind towards Among, who kind of muscles Yuma off the ball. Yuma's kind of left for dead. And because of Brockbank turning over possession, Yuma is now isolated with the right back caught like further up the field. So Yuma one-on-one with Among, gets muscled off the ball, gets done, and Among does really well, in fairness, after that to make his way into the box and finish from a pretty acute angle. But that doubling of the, denied the penalty chance, a handful of minutes earlier, now looking at a 3-1 scoreline off of, again, just kind of a slack moment, like lack of concentration, that leads to a 3-1 deficit, and undoes basically all of the good work that Locomotive had been doing up to that point.
Yeah, and this is one of those instances where I don't know what John Hutchinson is supposed to do about this. A professional footballer should know how to take a throw in that ends up at the feet or head of a teammate. I don't know what coaching. I mean, for argument's sake, I know that at the highest levels they do have throw-in coaches now, but that's more for like tactical and like actual like setup of these like throw-ins. But to actually just perform a throw-in without making it a foul throw, without throwing it to the opposition, and literally throwing away an opportunity to salvage something.
Yeah.
I don't know what Hutch or his staff are meant to do about that. You're a professional footballer. Like, you have to get that right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I'm not trying to dig Harry out. I think he's been pretty good. With his goal scoring, 2 goals. I mean, he's a good player. He's a good footballer, but that's just not good enough. Full stop.
Yeah.
And Yuma, I think he blames himself a little bit for that getting beat there. But again, he's isolated. You don't expect that the ball's going to turn over in that area when your team has the throw in.
Yeah.
So he's isolated, and I think, yeah, he does get beat. He's not the most like natural central defender, right? Or one-on-one defender. We know Yuma likes to go to ground. We know sometimes he can get outpaced, but he was not helped at all there by the throw in and really just the lack of support. And again, I don't know what Newton's meant to do about this. This is just a fantastic finish.
Yeah.
I have to give credit to the loyal player for that. For Amang was incredible on the night. Really, he was really, really good. Moshabani, again, like all the players played really well in that loyal attack, and he puts it pretty much the only place he can put it.
Yeah.
In that far corner. So it's just a really good goal, but it shouldn't ever have happened that way. So yeah.
And the moment for Locomotive fans where they're thinking maybe there's a chance Josue Aron Gomez scores his first goal of the season. It's pretty scrappy, but watching it back, I mean, again, Manny Sanupe at the center of everything that Locomotive have done. Like, that's been positive this year.
Sure.
Obviously, he's got goals and assists to his name. He has kind of the hockey assist, if you will, like sort of sets up the situation for the first goal, creates the second goal with a really good touch and drag. Should have drawn a penalty as well. Like, Sanupe at the center of all this, and it's sad really that Josue Aron Gomez's first goal of the season is in really just it's a consolation at the end.
It is a consolation at the end, unfortunately for Josue, who, as we know, has scored a lot of important goals over the years for Locomotive. I mean, you can accuse me of reaching, but I will say that at the very least, the substitutions that John is making are having an impact.
Yeah.
It's been rare that someone has come on and been just totally superfluous, if you will. So I like that. I like that from Josue. I like that from Nick. All these different players that can come on and make a difference and have done so and have made their presence felt on the pitch. I like that, but the real question is, why are we having to do that, right? Why are we having to constantly respond and make up for shooting ourselves in the foot with some really just like daft errors?
Yeah.
So yeah, and I guess right now I wanted to talk about at eval27 on Twitter, Eric's question. He said, it's hard to come up with new questions as it really is just largely the same concerns as the previous games, but what do you chalk up some of these individual mistakes to? The latest mistake being the Brockbag throw-in. How does Hutch best address them?
This is a really good question, because I think it's a tough thing to kind of broach with the players, because I think each of the players, if they're the caliber of person that I think we've met and had the pleasure to talk to on this podcast, a handful of the new guys, and we've obviously talked to a lot of the returning players over the years, like either in press conferences or just out and about in El Paso sometimes. I don't think anyone will be shying away from the fact that like mistakes are being made and people are, I would say, probably being held accountable for those things by those other personalities in the dressing room, by themselves. Like, I really do think that that's happening. In terms of addressing mistakes, I feel like most often managers lean on the fact that, like, hey, this mistake is not like who you are as a player. More often than not, like, you're doing the right thing, you're making the right decisions. So, like, relying on the fact that, hey, this is a one-off, short memory, like all those sorts of things. I think the problem is that with a trend across multiple individuals, multiple instances, I don't think Hutch can do that. Like, I think he has to emphasize, like, concentration, being switched on, like, every second, like, because we've seen, like, a lot of these games, we are playing well, and it's that moment of complacency or flat-footedness or moment of madness, like, however you want to, like, look at each moment. I think of, like, Newton diving in on Rodrigo Lopez in Sacramento. Total, like, no reason to do that. No thought like that was necessary by anyone except, Evan at that moment. This goal, the Harry Brockbank, the throw in, like, it looks like he kind of half-heartedly takes the throw. Like, it's just a very weird moment. And it just all seems to come back to the team is being punished like every single time they switch off. Like at the moment, like that doesn't happen to every single team, but right now, like they cannot afford to switch off ever because every single time the opposition is getting something out of it.
That's so true.
And yeah, I think he has to double down on the fact that mentality wise, like they have to constantly be paranoid that something bad is going to happen. Like they have to have that like feeling in the back of their head that if I take a break for 1 second, like I'm going to fuck us. And because that has been what has transpired. Like we have been punished like every single time. So I think he really has to emphasize it. Like, and I don't know how you address that, but I think he just, from a mentality perspective, especially with a short turnaround, like he's not getting a ton of training time before this game against Central Valley. Like this will be recovery and then straight into another game. I think in those sessions and looking at the film, like you just have to emphasize the fact that like in these moments, like every single thing that we do matters so much. And if you switch off or like every single decision that you make has such an impact, and it's not to freak the players out. It's literally just to like, hey, this cannot keep happening. Like we have to cut these mistakes out and these lax moments. They just can't happen. Like if we want to win games, we have to be switched on for 90 minutes.
Yeah, and like I said, with Eric talks about the Brockbank throw-in specifically, since that's the latest one. The players have to be accountable to themselves and to each other, because again, there are the basics of football that I really don't know what our coaching staff can do about that. You're professionals. Like staying switched on is the least you can do.
Yeah,
shouldn't have to be taught at this level. Can we keep emphasizing that? Of course. But, I mean, there are just basics, like, that you just have to perform, like, period.
Yeah.
So I hope that they are keeping each other accountable. I mean, we did see some shouting on the pitch. I mean, Lucho Soloniak not happy with some of the efforts that some of his teammates were showing in terms of being on the press and what have you. So, I mean, there are some voices in that dressing room that will get stuck into some of these guys and by all means, whatever it's gonna take.
Yeah, and this one, so it ends 3-2. Locomotive resigned to a fourth straight defeat to open the season, and left with a lot of questions, of which many of you asked through various forms. But we'll dive now into our listener questions. What do you say?
Yeah, let's do it.
Seriously Loco listener questions. So our first listener question comes from @Phoenix_1 on Twitter. He said, "For me, I think we're being too aggressive. That high press has its pros and cons, but I'd say there are more cons than pros, especially with Newton staying so high up the entire time, even when we're on the ball. Whenever a rival gets on a counter, that's when we fall." So with this comment, I mean, the system, like John has said even here that he's pretty invested in the system, and this is the way that he plays. So in terms of tweaks and things like that, what do we see from John going forward, and does he just try to weather the storm with the system as it is?
I think, yeah. I mean, I don't think he's interested in abandoning it at this time, and actually I think that would be the wrong move to all of a sudden jump ship from your own tactical philosophy after just a handful of results, because then you're undermining your authority and your own belief in yourself with the players. And I think that's the last thing that John Hutchinson will want to do. I do take this listener's point about being too aggressive. There is a such thing as too aggressive. I mean, there's a such thing as too passive, like, for sure. Like, we have to find that balance. And I will say, Evan Newton, I think this was his best game. Mm-hmm. I think he stayed at home a lot more than we've been seeing. And I think that just comes with getting the minutes into his legs. We know he's not been playing all that regularly. And I thought that he was pretty reserved in his positioning for the most part. Again, he comes out for that first one, but I think he has to do that.
Yeah.
If he doesn't do that, it looks really silly. Yeah, I think that there are a lot of cons to the way that we've been playing, but I think it's important to stick with it for the time being because, like I said, going backwards now is sending the wrong message. And of course, this will always be informed by results because that's what matters, and I completely take that on board. But I do think there are tweaks here and there that are being made, and I look to the goalkeeper as kind of the first signs of that, because I thought that Evan was very, traditional, I suppose, in his positioning and the way that he played against San Diego. So we'll see if that continues. And yeah, so I take the point for sure. But 4 games in, I wouldn't be comfortable saying like scrap it. Because at the same time, he only knows really this system. So if he tries, if the coach tries to teach something that he's not familiar with, that'll just be a disaster.
Yeah.
So
and we already had so much of the roster like join up late in the preseason as well, and all those things. I think part of it, or part of the inconsistency shown here as well, and again, this isn't me making excuses for the team, this is just me trying to be like thoughtful about about what's actually going on, is we haven't played the same back four in any of the first 4 games. Like, we have started with a different back four in one way or another in all of the 4 games. And so I think getting some consistency and getting a settled or somewhat consistent backline, I think, is just going to be so important. And those partnerships forming, and whether it's, Egiluth and Payadas, or, whether Boehner is part of that, whether Yuma's part of that, like, there just has to be, I think, when we felt most comfortable in recent seasons, and especially, going back to last year, we had such a good defensive record, and Mishak and Yuma were playing like every game as a center back pairing, almost without fail, like barring international duty or injury, like those were the 2 back there. And we just haven't seen that yet. Like, we have seen 4 different back fours, and in this system, I think it's really important to have at least that person who's marshaling, like whoever that person is that's playing, most often it's a center back who's directing the movement of that high line and all that stuff. Like, until we have that consistency of that like leader in there, I really do think there's gonna continue to be like these sorts of things, because these players are still learning how each other functions in this new system.
Right. Yeah. We had another one from Eric at ebal27 on Twitter, and he said, "You addressed it some in the live stream during the game, but why do you think we wait so long to show some urgency? We cannot keep waiting until we are down and there's little time left in the game to show some urgency." That's a great point. I think we've had to like respond and like do a lot late to get some goals and get things going. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I take Eric's point like really well. I do think it feels like there's a switch that gets flipped once we're trailing, and where we really like turn up the intensity. And I think I'd point to kind of those opening minutes against Sacramento as like the best example of what we should be doing, which is where like in this style, the best case, like kind of how it's designed to work is you go out and blitz the opponent for as many goals as you can get early on, pressing like crazy, running like crazy, just going like full throttle for the opening like 20-25 minutes, just playing absolutely like reckless abandon, going like full out, and then managing your intensity back once you have the lead. Like, and once you have a couple of goals or, a 2-goal lead or something like that, then you start like managing the game more, and you can have that kind of like more measured approach like for the rest of the game. And that looked like what we tried to do against Sacramento. Like, we came out of the gates absolutely flying. Like, we were talking like during that game about the fact that like, oh my God, like we're going to blow teams away this season. Like, we're going to be unstoppable because no one can cope with this. The problem is that, one, we know you can't sustain it for 90 minutes. You cannot be that intense for 90 minutes. I don't think anyone can do that. But to further like compound that, now it seems like we're almost managing our energy at the beginning of the game, which then it's like, okay, well, when do you turn the dial up? Like, do you wait to concede? Because that can't be the strategy, right? Like they can't manage their energy
Sure
until,
hope not.
okay, well, we'll just wait until we're behind, and then we'll really ratchet it up, And so I think the game management becomes a lot harder, because the whole idea of this system is come out of the gates flying, put the opponents into a deficit that they can't recover from, and then manage the game. Like, that's kind of the ideal of this system. So yeah, I think it's been a little discouraging to see us start so flat in these last couple of games and have like poor first halves, and then see the response and once subs are coming on, and once things need to change, now we're all of a sudden like ratcheting up the intensity and finding that second gear. I think we have to be able to find that like from the get-go. And I can't tell if that's a mentality thing, or if that's us like trying to, if it's the individual players trying to manage their own energy throughout a 90-minute, like, hey, if I'm going to be out here for 90 minutes, like I better not like run myself into the ground. And it just hasn't come together, I guess, like since that opening, I would say half hour, or actually, I mean, opening 40 minutes in Sacramento, it hasn't looked like that to start the game like since then. So that's where the concern is, I guess, in terms of, and Eric, to your point, yeah, we have to come out of the gates with that urgency, because the system depends on that.
For sure. And it's so jarring too, because it's such a departure from how Locomotive would act after conceding under Mark Lowry, in the early stages of Mark Lowry's tenure. I mean, it was like, if once we conceded, like, it's a wrap,
It's a question of how many at that point.
Yeah, it's like we're not, heads would drop, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Whereas this team, and maybe it is, the squad makeup and the actual personalities that we have in this dressing room, they don't seem to know when they're beaten.
Yeah.
Which can be a good thing. It is a good thing.
Yeah.
But you have to actually like see that over the line and not actually get beaten. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So and to be fair to the players, I don't know that. I don't think it's intentional. Like, I don't know if anyone's trying to save energy so much as it's their actual bodies rebelling against them, because these guys it still looks like some of them could really use more time on the training pitch and in the gym. But yeah, it is troubling for sure that we are waiting until the chips are down before we try to mount a comeback, and so far we haven't been able to come back fully.
Right.
Got within striking distance in both these games against San Diego and Las Vegas, and these guys are fighters, they've got heart, but it's so far not been good enough to get a result.
Yeah. Mentality in that case like only goes so far, and
right.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the results haven't been there. along those lines, with the fight backs and the goals being scored, at SG Contolis on Twitter asked, by the end of the season, we will probably lead the league in both goals for and goals against. Which will be higher?
If you extrapolate over the whole season from these four results, unfortunately, it'd probably be goals against.
Yeah.
We currently have the most goals against in USL, not just in the Western Conference, but I think in the entire league, which is shocking. So yeah, that probably would be higher. But in all seriousness, like, I hope we can land somewhere in the middle. I don't think we're going to be and we talked about this before the Locomotive even kicked a ball, is that we're not going to be the defensive stalwarts that we were. There's been a shift in personnel, in playing style, and we're going to ship more, period. But how we concede those goals and the frequency with which we concede them certainly has to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. I to his point, I do think the rate at which I'm encouraged by the rate at which we're scoring. I'm discouraged at the rate by the rate at which we're conceding. And the reality is that, like, typically throughout the season, goal scoring takes longer to kick into gear than defending. So I'm hoping that, like, if the defense is still getting to their top level and the offense is still getting to their top level, in theory, we will actually score more. We'll keep scoring more goals, and we'll stop shipping as many goals. But yeah, I mean, obviously, so far it's been total shootouts. Like, I mean, how many of these types of games where, both team, like, I mean, gosh, under Lowry, it felt like a 3-2 would have been like an insane Lowry game. And I mean, off the back of a 5-4, 3-2 felt like relatively tame
for sure
for this edition of Locomotive.
Yeah, it's such a departure. We've got one more from at Jake Konecki on Twitter. Jake says, can any sort of XG stats come with a trigger warning? I already have to deal with that as a Brighton fan. In all seriousness, though, I understand we are only 4 games in and we're going to have some growing pains, but how long can this continue before John's seat starts getting hot?
So I feel your pain, Jake, with the XG stats for Brighton, because it feels like some of your Brighton fandom is actually like rubbing off on Locomotive in terms of they have had the higher XG in each of these 4 games, which, again, advanced analytics, like, some people will say not that big of a deal, but the bottom line is that in each of these games, statistically speaking, Locomotive deserved to score more goals than their opponent. They haven't done that, but the stats suggest it. In terms of John's seat getting hot and, is he going to feel the pressure? I think you mentioned it on the broadcast. I think he probably feels pressure for himself already. Like, I think him having lost, 4 games to start the season, I think he already probably feels that. In terms of ownership, which at the end of the day, like, that's what matters, right? Like, what is Mountain Star thinking about, like, this? And I think at the end of the day, the only thing, and this is going to sound super cynical, but I promise, I think this is, like, just a sensible thing, is that if the form starts to seriously impact Locomotive's, like, attendance, ability to sell tickets, ability to sell merchandise, like, those sorts of things, like, if people in El Paso start to get apathetic about Locomotive and stop, it's 4,000 people at a game and then 3,000 and 2,000, like, if these marquee weekend matchups are not, like, close to sellout type like situations, I think that's when Mountain Star will start looking and being like, okay, this hasn't gone like well. And I think that's when they start to ask the questions, because if they feel like they're losing that, slice of El Paso that they've worked hard to get the attention of over the last 3 seasons into the fourth, I think it really will be at the end of the day like a business and like marketing decision way more than like a footballing decision. And I say I know that sounds cynical, but I really do think that it'll be way more about like, are they still able to market the team? And if it's really, really objectively bad for a significant amount of time, like people will stop going. Like that's going to it's going to impact the gate receipts, at a certain point. So 4 games in, 2 home games in, I think no. Like I really don't think that it's necessarily on their radar. We've got a home game against Monterey Bay. Like we've got we've got some more home games like coming up, and a chance to, he could go out and smash Monterey Bay, and a lot of people in El Paso will be like, man, this team is great. Because they, you know what I mean? Like without really knowing the broader context of like what's going on. And I'm not saying like, oh, they're bad fans or something like that and don't know the team. It's just a lot of people will like watch the home games, and that is like their level of Locomotive fandom, and that's totally fine. So if it like continues to be bad at home, and it starts to impact those commercial revenues for Locomotive, I think that's when Mountain Star starts asking the question.
Yeah, I don't think his seat is quite hot yet. If it's warm, it's because of himself. John's very hard on himself and very self-aware, and takes a lot of the blame for what's going on currently with this Locomotive squad. I've seen shouts, in the Twitter sphere and on Facebook that like, well, this is just what Mountain Star does. Like, look at how they, run FC Juarez. And like, 1, I think that's a little bit unfair. And 2, I think that's a false equivalency. I think there's so much different between the 2 leagues that it can't really be compared. And Alejandra has shown that she is quite ambitious. I mean, she brought in Tuca Ferretti, for Christ's sakes. Like, yeah. They are interested in winning, but at the same time, I think I do share the perhaps cynical view that, yeah, if the pockets are getting hurt, a change may be made. And that's just because the nature of USL Championship, where gate receipts are so important, because sponsorship revenue is not to the level of MLS or even higher on than that. So and that's just how it goes, I guess. But right now I don't think that there's any real threat of like him getting sacked. No. And it just seems kind of almost like crazy a little bit to be talking about it. Not that I fault the question or anything. I think it's perfectly fair, but yeah, I think there was a similar kind of question and sentiment around Mark at times early on, and I think that went pretty well at the end of the day. Yeah. So I think a little bit more time is in order, but if people have decided that John Hutchison is not their cup of tea, then by all means. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we talked about, the high profile managers in world football, and not comparing John Hutchison to any of those, obviously, but some of those managers who had a rough start to their tenure, and it has, since paid dividends that they have stuck around. We mentioned Southampton at the beginning of the show. Ralph Hasenhüttl has basically been in threat of being fired every single year that he's been the manager of Southampton. And they've stayed in the Premier League. They've performed like relatively well. They're pretty comfortably safe this year, that sort of thing. So not to say that's the goal for Locomotive of just being like comfortably mid-table, because obviously this club has ambition. This club wants to be at the top. But I do think, based on the nature of the search for Hutchinson, I think the reality is there is no like quick fix. There's no one, like, he has his whole entire staff like brought in himself. He signed most of the players. If they sack Hutchinson like 4 games in, there is no plan B. Like, there is no one that they had, like, on, this is someone that they identified when they were searching for Mark 4 years ago. Like, when they eventually hired Mark Lowry, this was another guy on the short list. This is like that search also, I mean, it took a long time to announce. It took like a long time to get the deal over the line, all this stuff. I don't think they do anything before the end of the season. Like, I think it could, there's a reality where, hey, like, things don't go great, but I would say that it would at least be the end of the season before we see any sort of change at Locomotive.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, let's hope that it doesn't come to that, but
yeah,
at the end of the day, it is a business, and got to get some return on investment, so.
Yeah. Well, we've got a chance to bounce back extremely quickly with a U.S. Open Cup match tomorrow night. That is Tuesday. You're probably listening to this on Tuesday morning or Tuesday afternoon. So tonight, I guess, future listener. So we will take a quick break and then come back to preview that match against Central Valley Fuego FC. The Seriously Loco match preview. Welcome back to Seriously Loco. Mika, the U.S. Open Cup is back this year after a couple of years of hiatus due to COVID. Locomotive drawn against Central Valley Fuego FC in Fresno, California, sort of the Phoenix club of Fresno FC, I guess, in that community. Yeah. But U.S. Open Cup returning, Locomotive have a very short history in the Open Cup. One match, Forward Madison. Not a lot of people, we don't like to talk about it. It didn't go great in our inaugural season, a 3-0 loss. So Open Cup coming back, what's it mean for the club? What's it mean for you as a supporter of the club?
I love US Open Cup. I'm so glad that it's back. It's just, I don't know. It's just a nice little breakup of the sometimes monotony of league football, because you get to see so many different teams that you're not normally exposed to. Some of the matches have been absolutely brilliant already, if not a bit dramatic. I think of, Denton Diablos versus Defeaters and Motown versus Westchester United. So it's been fantastic. Like you said, we have a very short and very bad history in this competition, but it has been some years. So hopefully there won't be any scar tissue from that loss to Forward Madison on a Wednesday night or whatever it was.
Yeah.
With our reserve team. But this is also a really, really quick turnaround, only 48 hours from having played San Diego, only a day in between, so I doubt any training has gone on, probably just some video and some travel, honestly, to get from San Diego up to Fresno. So it's hard to kind of scout this one because Central Valley Fuego have only played one competitive fixture, ever. Yeah. In being an expansion side for USL League One and kind of the Phoenix side, as you said, for Fresno. So I don't know what to expect, but I'm hoping that we can get our first win of the season. I mean, please. That would be really nice to just get some confidence into these guys because we know that it's hard to come by at the moment. But yeah, it should be interesting. How are you feeling about this one?
So I have talked about / written about / whatever covered, I guess, lower league soccer in the US for quite a long time now. And when I say lower league, I'm talking amateur levels, a lot of that stuff. So this competition has for a long time, and I mean it was at one point the longest continuously running cup competition in soccer in the whole world, up until a couple of years ago. They lost the streak, but the reality of this competition is that for a lot of clubs who are in the competition right now and who were in the first round, because for those who don't know, U.S. Open Cup is a staged entry, so clubs enter at different stages based on their league placement. So USL Championship entering in the second round, a whole first round was played of clubs that qualified either through their amateur leagues or through a qualifying tournament, like open tournament. And so this is their season. Like for a lot of these clubs, like this is the marquee thing that they will do. Now they have leagues and there are a lot of really good clubs at really competitive leagues at, the amateur levels and semi-pro levels. But this is their chance to play. Like they're going to face off against like fully professional teams, and they're going to have these opportunities to knock off, get the whatever, like the giant killing and that magic of the cup sort of stuff. And so I love this competition for a number of reasons. I think for us taking on a League One team, I think it gives me a little less like, I won't feel anything if Fuego go out of this. Like, if we had been drawn against defeaters, or if we had been drawn like against maybe one of the like open qualifying teams or something like that, I'd feel a little bit of nostalgia, or not nostalgia, but a little bit of like that kind of like magic of the cup sort of thing. And like, oh, could they go on a run? This for me is like, we have a chance now to get a third round matchup against an MLS team. Like, and the reality of that potential, like potentially getting a Dallas or somebody in the second round, or an Austin, or in the third round, I should say, that it should be the goal. Like the idea of a marquee matchup like that, especially if the swap, like, I mean, it would be packed out if an MLS club came to town. And I think getting that opportunity for me is like what we have to look forward to, and why winning this game. I think mentality wise, I'd be interested to be a fly on the wall, because getting the first win under Hutchinson is obviously very important. The cup is not necessarily important in the grand scheme of things, because obviously league performance, playoffs, like that's what we as fans want. The odds of us winning the Open Cup are so slim, like that, the tendency often is like, well, why even waste our energy? Let's just let's play a change team. Let's get through it. Hopefully injury free, that sort of thing. The 4 losses to open the season, I think, changed that dynamic completely. And I think now this is a bit of a must win for Hutch, because he's playing inferior opposition, or, seemingly inferior opposition in a League One side, and hasn't won yet. So I think the pressure has ratcheted up pretty significantly. And if they can take something, like if they can win this match and bring that home into the match against Monterey Bay, maybe it just kickstarts their season a little bit and gets them out of whatever funk they're facing. But as you said, Central Valley Fuego, bit of an unknown quantity in terms of their rosters compiled of guys who played in NISA, guys who played in USL League One, USL Championship at like a lower level, or maybe not as frequently minutes wise. Handful of guys, college grads or recent college grads. We just have the one match to go off of in terms of rating them. They beat Greenville Triumph, who were finalists in the USL League One last season, by 2 goals to 0.
And champions the season before.
Yeah, yeah, champions the season before. They win 2-0, 2 goals from Christian Cheney, who spent last year at LA Force in NISA. The stats tell a story of a Greenville side that probably deserved better out of this match, but Central Valley in this, having less of the ball, having less opportunities, able to come away with a 2-0, sort of a primer for the sort of match that we could expect to face.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they from what we can tell against Greenville, they looked like they were pretty comfortable not to have the most, of the ball. They were clinical with the chances that they did get. because Greenville outshot them by almost, more than double actually. But it was Central Valley Fuego that made it count. And Christian Cheney, I mean, that's a nice little story because he is a Fresno native. So
Yeah.
scoring 2 goals on his debut for the new club is pretty damn good. And so he'll be up for it for sure. I'm just wondering how we line up, because again, it's we have only one day in between two fixtures. The guys haven't even come home from California, and guys are gonna be leggy. So, uh, to our knowledge, they've brought the entire complement. Minus Seb Velasquez, unless he left today. But yeah, I'm thinking we'll have to rotate, whether we want to or not. I'm sure there is an argument to go strong in this one, but it's a long season, and we have to make sure that we're being mindful of how many minutes each of these guys is getting. So I don't know. I think we'll rotate. I think maybe we see Beigel in goal to make his debut. That seems like something that would be a good opportunity for him.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just there's a lot of unknowns here, but it is exciting because it's just going to be a little bit of a change of pace, I think.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I do see us making changes. I think that is totally fair. Of the guys, like the guys who came on as subs kind of inform like a little bit like guys who could start in this one. I think we probably will see Calvillo in for Richie Ryan because I think Richie playing 70 minutes in just a couple of days before this one. I don't think Richie starts. And this was a little bit better than our last away game in that we made it out of it without every single player pulling up with an injury at the end, like they did at the end of the Sacramento game. But Sanupe plays a full 90, Diego plays a full 90, Dylan plays a full 90, Foxy, Yuma play the full 90. So yeah, I think Beigel could be in there. I think Borelli, we could see Borelli get a start. Francois only played about half an hour against Loyal, so it could be that he's in there. I think we see Calvillo, Gomez, and then I think John Brown probably comes in from the start. Siobhan John Brown just we've seen him start at right back before. I think we probably see him again, and I'm interested to see like I hope we go with a pretty strong lineup from the start and have the academy kids on the bench to come on, like in the case where we have a lead, like give the guys a rest, like kind of once we ideally like we've put it kind of out of reach, and then we can bring those guys on just to prevent injury or keep guys healthy, keep them from getting too overworked before Saturday. But yeah, this is the tight turnaround makes it a little bit tough to predict like how guys are reacting to the 90 minutes against San Diego.
Oh man, it just feels like we had such a long break and now we're like getting hit for two like right away.
Just back to back.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it definitely does. So go for it.
Do we dare make predictions or do we just like let it ride and give ourselves the day off since it's a different competition?
Yeah, I think we called it's the magic of the cup. So anything can happen. I don't really feel like predicting this one. Because of the opposition is an unknown. And for us, I don't know, maybe I can take some heat off myself like by not predicting anything and then not feeling like I've jinxed anything as well.
Fair. Well,
yeah.
Yeah, let's let that one breathe then. I agree because there's just really nothing to go off. Really. We'll just have to see.
We will. Yeah, it's it's an interesting fixture for a team. Normally after a loss you'd say like, hey, you want to put it right, and similarly, we had that kind of like quick turnaround from the United match to Vegas, and we thought, hey, chance to put it right, and it didn't go that way. So I'm hoping that this actually is that for this team, because like I said, I do think it is a chance to get things kickstarted, but we have to take the opportunity to make it that.
I'm just hoping it's not as dramatic as some of the U.S. Open Cup stuff that I've seen so far, because my God, this is not for the faint of heart, y'all.
No, no, it is cup football in many ways. I mean, from the first round, I'm counting 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 red cards.
Wow.
There were,
and there should have been more.
Yeah. Yeah, 2 games ended with teams scoring 6 goals. I mean, some absolute bangers in there. I think the Minneapolis City, in a losing effort, Minneapolis City's Lionel Vang hit an absolute banger of a free kick from like 40 yards. So
against a really good team in Des Moines Menace. So.
Yeah. Who ended up coming out on top. But anyways, yeah, cup football is just, it's a cool opportunity, and I'm really, really looking forward to seeing how we come out. You guys can follow along with us on Twitter, Twitch, or Facebook. We'll have the live watch along because I'm not sure what the state of the stream is going to be in terms of ESPN Plus, but I mean, they're a League One side, so they probably have the right setup and everything. Sometimes the amateur sides don't always have the best streaming setups, but
fair.
But yeah, so you can join us on Twitter, Twitch, or Facebook for that one, and then we've got we'll be back presumably like around the either to recap the Open Cup match or to talk Monterey Bay as well. So yeah, stay tuned for those on your podcast feed, and then follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of the above, and we've also got the piece up on Patreon. So I just want to say huge thank you to anyone who follows us or supports us on Patreon. It really does help us out and helps us just do cool things like with the show, because we do anything that we do, like we do with our own money. So every little bit helps in just sustaining those things. So thanks so much to those who support the work, and thanks for reading and listening along with us all season. We are trying to, keep the faith in a way. We are also voicing our concerns. So just know that we're right there with you, experiencing these things as fans. Hopefully Locomotive go out and set things right against Central Valley Fuego tomorrow night. And until we're back to talk about it again, stay loco.